This is the Simpit. I'm your host, Shaun Cole, and welcome to today's edition of the Pit Stop, where you are the real star of today's show, being part of the pit crew. But on our Friday edition, it's not me alone, it's me and our very own Billy Strange. How you doing, Billy?
Woohoo! Good, how are you?
I am doing pretty good. Happy Friday to you. Can't believe it's already Friday. It's like one of those weird, funky weeks with New Year's and all the holiday stuff, and just hard to believe it's already the weekend coming.
Everything flies by.
Everything does fly by. So, with everything going on, what have you been up to? You been doing any driving, racing, testing? What are you all about this week?
Oh, let's see. And hello to everybody in chat, by the way. And let us know what you've been driving as well. We'll see what everybody's has been doing. What have I been doing? I gave in. People were talking about the R Factor 2 cars, the GT cars that they released. And I decided to give it a try.
Without the Aston.
I did. I gave in. I caved. And I've got to say, those are really impressive. That's probably some of the best GT cars I've driven. I've got to wait for the Aston, and I'll probably do a review on them. But in short, I was surprised and impressed.
Really?
I was.
You sound a little surprised, almost.
I get along okay with R Factor 2, and I get along okay with GT cars. They're not my strong suit, I don't feel like. But these cars in particular just, I don't know. And what's funny is I went back and drove the older, like the Bentley and the Corvette and stuff, and they just don't have the same feel. So I don't know if it's just the cars or if they did something a little different with these, but I was impressed.
You sound almost shocked.
I do. I feel because I just didn't expect to be like, I don't know. They've done something, and I'm just not sure what it is, but it's probably the best feeling GT cars I've driven.
Now, that puts Studio 397 on quite a roll. I agree, Max. In that, like, their last track, people are like, oh, this is the best version of this track ever done. It's
I tried it on Sebring.
Okay.
So I had not run Sebring yet, and I tried it on Sebring. I'm like, man, this feels awesome. Like, I got that same feeling for those cars that I basically get from Automobilista that I talk about. Like, just the way the cars communicate, it was just like, man, this feels really, really nice. Like, I understand, even when I mess up, hello, I understand I understand what the car is doing, and I understand that I messed it up. It just didn't do something weird on me. So I was a little surprised at how much I enjoyed driving those cars. So I drove that. We did some testing, which you'll talk about in a minute, for Daytona. And then I played around with a little bit of retro stuff. We'll talk at the end of the show. But the main thing was, I guess, just playing around with R Factor 2 with those cars.
With everything you said, one of the questions that we get asked, or I get asked from time to time, is like, what is my favorite combination in sim racing? Just, and often, even though it'll surprise a lot of people, I'll often say that, the Indy cars at Long Beach and Project Cars 2 is one of my absolute favorite sim racing scenarios.
Right.
It's just a really fun combination where the car, the track, and the sim all get along really, really well. And it sounds like these GT3 cars at Sebring, because somebody else literally posted a clip, I don't remember who, it was one of my friends on Facebook, of the Porsche at Sebring, and said,
Porsche's my favorite. Which is, again, I'm not usually a big fan of, I know that particular Porsche isn't like the older Porsches, but still, I'm not usually a fan of the way the Porsche drives. And for whatever reason, I was the fastest with the Porsche. I felt the best with the Porsche. And on my brain, I literally sat there and just stared at the screen after I had driven all four cars and just kind of went, wow, that was really cool.
That's awesome. That's so
Yeah,
awesome.
I was pleasantly surprised by those.
I'm gonna have to try that out. And I mean, we always ask you guys. I'm asking Billy what he did. I'm gonna talk about what I've been doing this week. You know, we want to know what you guys are doing, but it sounds like this is one of those combinations that if you haven't tried it yet, you need to. You know, I've for a long time been saying Studio 397 R Factor 2. It's like it's one of those fine wines. You know, it had to go down in the cellar, and it had to just kind of I don't know what you call it when a wine cures or a wine ripens, or I don't know what the process is called.
I like I like the.
But it needed something along those lines, and we're definitely
Like I
there
said,
where it's time to start drinking it.
they've had versions of the tire model that I have not gotten along with, and when they came out with the Radical, I hated that car. There was something wrong with that car in its initial build, and it's progressively from there gotten better from the stuff that they've released. Like the last GT stuff, I mean, I liked it. It was good. But this feels I tried it. I went back and ran the other cars, the last pack they released before this. And like I said, I don't know if it's the cars in particular or if they've done something a little extra or differently with the new pack of cars, but I was again very surprised.
Yeah, Sim Racing 604 says a wine ages, but isn't it? It's a process. I mean, I guess that is the wording used, though. But all right,
I like ripen.
ripen. So this week, I noticed that I have focused all of my attention to the endurance race. Like, yeah, I want to do some other things, and I do because I have to review or do other stuff. But that want to drive, it's all about endurance. And even though I'm probably 150 laps in, I'm not bored at Daytona yet. There's something about that track. I love turning laps at Daytona in the prototype. So really that's where I've been all week, is just various different sessions of that. Other than on New Year's Eve, we did have a patron-only Wreckfest event that was one of the best ever.
Fun.
Yeah, because everybody was in rare form that night. We didn't stream it because we knew it would get out of control, and it did get out of control. And then beyond that, I've just been working on this guy. I got my Thrustmaster TSS handbrake Sparko mod. Terrible name, by the way. I go into that in my review, which has been filmed. Not a terrible, it's misleading name.
Right.
You know, it's handbrake. Well, no, a lot of people are going to buy it for its sequential shift drive. So that's what I've been up to. A little bit of driving, a little bit of reviewing, a little bit of having fun with Wreckfest, and just getting started with 2019 really is where I've been at.
Yeah, right. Remember to write 2019 on everything. You have to not write. Well, I don't know how many people would use checks anymore. I use checks every once in a while, but just writing down the date in general.
Yesterday, I was talking to my brother about something. I was ranting about something and complaining, and I'm like, "Don't they realize it's 2018?" And it's like, "No, it's 2019. Get it right."
It makes your rant all the more special. Hey, really quick in chat, Jesse Fox, we answered his question last week about hardware and if you need new stuff. And he just put, your guys' answer last week to my question gave me a new spirit. No more excuses about not having high-end stuff. Practice, practice, practice. Focusing on things I never did before. Thanks. A, You're welcome. B, that's fantastic.
Yep. I even sometimes, unless you really know what you're doing, I'd almost say the same thing about car setup, too. It's like, before you worry about what that damper setting's doing, maybe you should worry about that apex you're missing.
I would agree. So when we did the testing, how do you feel the testing went? Because this will segue us into another topic here, but I did want to get thoughts on how, when you go to test, what are you trying to accomplish by testing?
That's a great question, and we could do a whole hour on this alone. Me, I'm not an engineer. I'm not a crew chief. I can make some very basic handling changes, garage changes to cure wrong things more than make the car right. When I get out to a track, especially a track that I already know, especially a car that I already know, it's really trying to look for a line that either gets me more stability so that I can start attacking with a little more confidence and carrying more speed. One of the things that I find that I tend to do in sim racing, and I think everyone's guilty, I overdrive the wrong moments and I underdrive the right moments a little bit. And so sometimes I find myself constantly pushing into braking. I use a hydraulic brake pedal. I'm very good at braking. and I can usually brake in a shorter distance than almost anybody I'm on the track with. However,
Yeah, you jerk.
I sometimes also find myself pushing it too far and being so late in the braking zone that I'm actually braking to the moment that I don't want to be on the brake anymore, and I want to let the car and the tire work better. And I
Sure.
prevent it from doing that by being so demanding of my braking skills, right? So yeah, I think for me, it's really trying to tighten up the zones and get it so, the other thing that I find, and then I'll shut up, is that sometimes I get a preconceived notion on where a braking zone is, and then I find myself actually like kind of impatiently too slow mid corner, and maybe even getting to the gas a little early, or even getting to the gas before apex because I'm like, wow, I really overslowed it down. And so it's like, well, maybe I need to reanalyze where the beginning of that braking zone is. Because if I'm consistently coming in too slow, I am leaving too much on the table. So
Sure.
that's a lot of what I do is it's just sort of tightening up my marks and trying to just be really clear of where my points are. We're still in that point where we're not running in traffic. We're almost still hot lapping to an extent. And it's like, well, right now is when I should be able to do the same perfect line every lap, because I don't have other factors. So that's what I'm really trying to do, is get it so that consistency is through the roof. So how about you? What I mean, Daytona, the Corvette. What's it all about for you getting there?
I don't have a whole lot of laps at Daytona Road Course. Really, just our testing is about the most I've run on it. I've done a few laps before, but never like run a race there, nothing. So really most of the laps that I'm going to say like 85-90% of the laps that I've put together have been in the 2, now 3, I think, test sessions we've done. So it's just kind of putting together how the car works. I like the Daytona prototype because it forces you to not overdrive the entry of the corner, let the car roll, and then be sensitive with the throttle on exit when the tires get warm after a couple laps. So I think that type of car plays into my driving style.
Right.
And really, some people start and they overdrive everything and then back up. I tend to try to put solid laps together and slowly creep into where I can find I can brake a little later. I can get on the throttle a little earlier because, you slow down too much, you horsepower the corner, you spin the tire. It's everything's combined. And I think the biggest thing is people don't realize you don't need to learn the whole track every lap. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So I usually pick a turn that I'm struggling with and I start there and I work on that corner. And what happens is it changes your speed for the next corner. So then you work on that one and you just kind of work yourself around the track.
Yep.
Rather than trying to take it all in at one time. It's usually too overwhelming.
Right.
So that
Did you ever play Gran Turismo in the level where, I mean, one of my favorite things, and this is so not sim racing, this is gaming. One of my favorite things in Gran Turismo was the ability to practice a particular section of a track. And a lot of them were put in challenges, if I'm not mistaken. But it was like, instead of me having to learn the entire track, I was able to have a scenario where I was, going into that left-right combination at speed, and the gold, silver, and bronze goal were achieving certain times in that section. And it was like, to me,
Yes.
I found it so beneficial because maybe it is just 1 or 2 corners that you really need to focus your energy on, but when you're looking at a minute or 2 minutes a lap, depending on where you are, that's a lot of miles.
Get impatient.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you tend to get impatient, and then people start trying to drive too hard. And if anything, iRacing teaches you to be nice to the car on the entry of the corner, and then they like a late apex typically to get the most speed. So I find people are too aggressive usually. There is a point where you finally figure out the car and you can be more aggressive, but initially people are too aggressive. And that, like I was going to say, that kind of ties into our first story. Rutgers Kev has a YouTube channel, and he's been doing some podcasting stuff about iRacing. And apparently, Marcus Ambrose is a fan of his channel, and Rutgers Kev was talking about how he struggles at Brands Hatch. He's absolutely terrible. Well, Marcus Ambrose happens to teach at Brands Hatch. And so there is a video, and I just wanted to talk about this in context with what we were talking about in testing at Daytona. A lot of the things he's going over are excellent for people trying to pick up tips on driving in general. What he explains is paramount to learning, adapting, and driving on a track. He talks about what lines you should take. He talks about what tires do. You know, they can really only do one thing. And when you start to make them do two things, turning and braking, accelerating and braking, that kind of thing, they don't like it. So he explains the problem, and then he shows the line. And one of my biggest criticisms about iRacing is usually the dark line on the track in a track that doesn't rubber in naturally from everybody driving. So in other words, start from a zero state. Let's say they put it at 20, 30, 40. That line is usually not exactly the line you want to drive. And he explains that. And he talks about how you don't necessarily need to tweak a bunch of the baseline setups. You just need to learn what the car is giving you and how to drive around the track.
It looks like the built-in driving line on iRacing for the most part is acting like everything's a constant radius corner, and it is approaching from the point that turn into apex to turn out to tracking out would be one arc for every single corner. Like it, you know, there is no late apex line on it or anything of the sort.
Right, and he goes on to explain that iRacing is a little different from the real world, but there's still a lot of the principles that still apply. But one of the things is, you know, I'm sure that they either, when they laser scanned or they looked at the track and decided that that's the line that the actual guys are driving on, he says it's going to be a little different. So don't always judge that dark line in the track as the line you should be running on. His main thing is he talks about gear selection, which is a really, you know, if you want to limit your wheel spin out of a corner, you know, select the next higher gear. Right. Don't shift all the way down into first or second gear if you don't need to. So it's just little things like that. I think he does a really good job of taking Kevin around the track and explaining why he's doing what he's doing. So I thought it was a good, I thought it was a good video.
Well, it applies to a lot of the conversations that we as a team have been having with the Daytona. And various things. I mean, like you know, one of the big talks that we've been having is what gear through the bus stop, for example. And Brandon, hey Brandon, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good. How are you guys this morning?
I'm doing well. Producer Brandon there, always on in the background. Brandon and I were having a whole conversation about gear through the bus stop. Brandon and I were both using third gear, and both of us are just sliding the ass around the whole time through the bus stop, using throttle to steer the car, which, despite having the ability to drive the car that way, it's only going to lead to trouble. It's just a matter of time before you overgoose it and literally put the rear end of the car into the wall coming out of the bus stop. And that I've been now playing with fourth gear instead of third.
I've been using fourth gear just because the car for me rolls a little better, and I can turn the car a little easier. You know, it's the line you take through there too. You sweep out too far. You want to feel like you shifted into third gear, so it'll gear brake or engine brake a little more, so you feel like you can make it and then squirt out of the corner. Where I found fourth gear just let me roll through there really nice. So yeah, it's discovering those things, and that's only after you really learn the track. But the problem is if you're doing third gear there and then you're spinning out all the time, which one is it? Is it the line? Is it your gear? You know, and it's all those things that you have to start putting together. So
sure. You have one other factor too. That third downshift into third gear is the one that is most likely to skip the rear end and and give you just a little hiccup on entry. So it's actually a dangerous downshift, or it's the one that if you're debating, that's one other factor of running in third or getting down. Last thought on the Daytona prototype. Sorry, I can't get that car out of my head. It blows my mind how much that car, and people are going to really not believe me when I say this, how it's a momentum car. That car drives like the Mazda MX-5 in the weirdest of ways, and I just find that I can drive it the exact same way. And when I overdrive entry at four-wheel slides with so much confidence that you can do it all day long, it's just that it's the slow way, and it's the way that's overheating the tires as well.
Yes.
And the other thing that I'm finding about that car, much like the Mazda, is if you underspeed a corner, it changes the exit to make it more difficult. Like the Mazda, you can almost accuse that car of not having any power and never lighting up the tires.
Well, that goes back to horsepowering out of the corner.
Yep.
And if you don't keep that rolling speed up, you're using more trying to accelerate now to the same speed as somebody that's rolled through the corner. And so their corner speed is going to be much better than somebody that tries to point and shoot like you would a motocross track, or a supercross track. It just, they like that mid center roll, and that's, everybody can go fast down the straightaway, right? So where are you going to pick up time? It's in the corners.
Yep, absolutely. And there's three parts to the corner when you really break it down. It's not under braking, it's not mid corner, it's not exit. There are three places to win and lose time. And that's what I like about this Marcos Ambrose video, or listening to any. I mean, I think in the world of coaching, you can only learn so much from one coach. At some point, if you're a pro, as much as you might love the coach who got you somewhere, at some point you need other opinions, because it's just little tidbits you're going to get from each. It's not even just coaches, fellow drivers, just little tidbits of information. It's like they might just say one little thing, and it might be like, wow, I never thought of that. I need to try that or put that to use in my sim racing.
Absolutely. So anyway, check out the video from Rutgers Kev. If you're looking for some driving tips, and really it's not just solely Brands Hatch, even though that's what they're talking about. The tips apply to just driving in general in any sim.
Yep, absolutely. And you're always going to see common corners too. So even when you're looking at specific corners, it's like, yes, well, at some point there's a corner at Brands Hatch that is almost identical in the way it drives to a corner somewhere else, and you just, that's the other thing that we're always doing in sim racing, is reapplying those skills. So the guys at Wicked Cushion being a sim racing team, they have now partnered with Casey Kane to create an esports team. And when I asked Billy about this, because Billy's our dirt track guy, I think it's safe to say that. Billy went on to say that, basically, like Casey Kane, being a very known name. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Being a very known name, he was able to put an email out there, probably relatively easy to recruit a handful of really good drivers to form this team. But this is, at this point, this is the super team in dirt track, I would have to assume.
I think it's probably one of the best ones that are out there. I know Kevin Swindell was putting some people together, but I think universally, not outside of dirt racing, Casey Kane is more recognizable. And Casey Kane came from dirt tracks, and he's going back to sprint car racing now that he's retired from Cup. So, it's like Fernando Alonso and some of these other guys. They're well known enough that they come in and go, okay, I want to start an esports team, and I'm going to put you guys and you guys and you guys in. And that's what I'm going to take these guys and make me the best dirt racing team I possibly can. So, and he did it. If you read the article, he's got 3 of the guys that are already in the pro dirt league and iRacing, and then 1 other driver that's in the Wicked Cushion team that is on the upper end, that I imagine he'll be in the pro series as well. These guys are usually really fast. Just kind of an interesting thing. It goes back into our esports conversation about where does it go? Where's the money at? That kind of thing.
Well, and how's it playing out? And if you want to be a dick about it, you can say that's cherry picking or poaching. It's like, okay, I'm Casey Kane. I'm going to come in and I'm going to hand select my favorite of the favorites. And because I'm Casey Kane, they're all going to run to me because with me comes opportunity. And I could sit here and get ruffled feathers and be offended at such things in the name of the greater good of some utopian lifestyle. But in reality, you compare it to real life sports. And, the thing that I think about is, like, right now, Alabama football is just out of control. They're the best football team on planet Earth. And it's like they have the easiest time recruiting players, easier as well. And it's like, well, that success leads to people wanting to be part of that success. It's an easy pick. When LeBron James was picking a new team, even though the Lakers suck, it was still the biggest TV market in all of basketball. It's an easy no-brainer pick. Sure, I'll go play for the Lakers. Or, everyone wants to play for the Yankees because they're the most successful baseball team that's ever been. It makes total sense. But, again, I am kind of the guy who's always looking for the greater good or looking out for the little guy. And it's like, oh, God, here we go. Team Redline for a decade has basically just poached and cherry-picked. And no offense to Team Redline because they are the Yankees of sim racing.
Right?
Yeah, or Coanda.
You do what you can.
Yeah, Coanda's making a good run at it, and I'd say that they get a nice sloppy seconds to Redline.
Well, then.
I don't know if it's right or wrong. I mean, I think some people are going to, see it as both ways. I think it's just, it's business. And
I was going to say, to a degree, it's business, right? I mean, if you're trying to have the best team, get the best people. And then if you feel like you're a relatively good driver, you're going to try to get onto that team. In my eyes, I would, so I could learn and then I could say I'm on Team Redline or Coanda. And now with this, like Casey Kane, it's like it's just going to be interesting how much money there's going to be. Is there enough to spread around to everybody? Or is this just purely a branding idea and that's the end of it?
Go ahead, Brandon.
I was going to say, I think it's kind of always been this way if you think about it. The Yankees and Babe Ruth and, the LA Kings with the Gretzky era and stuff. And I think it's just such a new concept to us as sim racers since the evolution of ESport that it's kind of interesting to look at it from that perspective.
The other thing that I think we're going to see a lot more of, I think right now it is mostly promotional, and that's why the payouts aren't reaching the 10th place, the 20th place, the 30th place driver, because it is still just sort of a big media attention. Let's just put a big price on it. Let's focus all of our energy on the number one guy only. We don't even care about the story. We just need the photo op of him with the trophy and the big check. That's all they're really looking for the most part, it seems. But I think it's going to continue to evolve. And the other thing that I think it's going to be very interesting in the near future of sim racing is we're going to start seeing silly seasons where drivers are jumping around at the end of the season.
Isn't that going to be interesting?
Yeah, and it's going to be big news. Here we are doing ESport news on our show, and that could be the big deal. It's like, oh, well, Mitchell DeJong has left Coanda and has moved over to Apex. Sure. The other thing that I think is going to be the heads up that a lot of people need. You're sitting there, you got your team. You know who's the best guy on your team, right? Like, if we had to, we know who's the fastest guy on our group. And or the fastest couple guys. And if you're one of those team managers or you're involved in a team and, you guys take it, chances are one of these days you're going to lose your best driver. They're going to get poached. They're going to get cherry picked. Right. And all of a sudden they're going to get a call from Casey Kane and saying, hey, come be part of this. And they're not going to look back, and it's not going to be, you shouldn't be too offended either because, again, it's all about, there's only so many opportunities. And much like real business, loyalties sometimes, get put aside in the name of the almighty dollar, I guess.
Got to make that decision. What's going to work best for you?
Yeah. So, speaking of the almighty dollar, I think one of the biggest news stories in ESport, because I, for a while, was a little concerned about iRacing and being competitive in the ESport world, as we see these huge competitions going for, Heat 3, for, Project Cars, for Gran Turismo, for Forza.
I just enjoy the way you said Heat 3. I like that.
But the Peak Antifreeze series, they're up to $100,000. To me, hands down, the best oval racers on planet Earth in sim racing. And anyway, the iRacing did release their schedule, and it looks like they've kind of simplified things a little bit in terms of the season seems a little shorter. Sorry, I'm getting a little flustered with my words here. A little shorter than it was in the past, which I think is good, because I think one of the downsides was the fact that these guys weren't getting paid all that much money when you broke down the amount of time and energy in races to win $10,000. Now, if 100 grand's on the line, I don't know what the top payout is to number one, but he's going to get paid a lot better when you look at it being 14 regular season races followed by a 4-race playoff for the Peak Antifreeze Championship in iRacing this season. So we have the full schedule there, racing every other week starting in February.
Yeah, so why do you think they did that? Why do you think they all of a sudden changed it when there's more money on the line?
Well, I'm wondering, that's a great question, Billy. Maybe it was just the intensity in that they were starting to be concerned that they would lose drivers. So when we talk about silly season, iRacing, last thing in the world they need is Michael Conti and Ray Alfala and, all the heads of state to go be part of the Heat 3 championship instead. Because if they're going to be ESport champions, don't they need to go where the almighty dollar is?
Yep.
So, and part of that money, I think if you're looking at it as from a career perspective, your salary isn't just what they pay you, it's how many hours. I mean, if they give you $100,000 but want you to work 100 hours a week, you're not getting paid all that well.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. We've shortened the season, or less races for more money. And my only curiosity is, were there murmurings or something that kind of, as you alluded to, were they going to go run something else and said, hey, there's more money here. If you want us to compete with you guys, we need a little, some sort of balance between the two, or I don't know. It's just, it's, again, mirroring the real life series and that kind of thing. Why did we cut it shorter? Not that they shouldn't have. I actually think it's a good thing. It's just something I thought about when I initially saw the shorter schedule. I'm like, wow, wonder why they did that.
Yeah, it's significantly shorter, it seems, and every other week, so that's a little less demanding as well. Do you think, what are your thoughts if Ray Alfala, 4-time champion, were to jump ship and go to Heat 3? Do you think he's a shoo-in to win the whole thing? Or do you think that it's such a different sim that it's like just resetting the whole board?
I think when you're at that level, and Alfala's proven that he can win in other things besides just doing the stock cars. So I think most of those guys at the very top end are just good sim racers in general. They're also really good at picking apart a title or a sim to find those little spots where they can gain time.
Oh, that's a juicy topic, Billy Strange.
Right? That's part of it, is finding the loopholes and the fudge factor. And that's an awful phrase if you think about it. Anyways.
Fudge factor?
Yes. But you find it, and those guys are really good at it, whether it's a group of them working at it or whatever. So I don't think that, again, this kind of goes back to the topic last week, where I think no matter what, top guys are always going to be at the top no matter what sim they choose to go to. And it's just a matter of time before they finally figure it out. And again, so you're going to have the upper echelon of sim racers, and then you're going to have all these guys just below them that are super fast still, that are trying to get in. But the further down you go, the more specialized I think people become, So I don't know. I think they would. I think for the most part, if we're saying those guys were to, in conjunction, run the Heat 3 championship, I think they'd be just as fast over there.
I happen to believe the same thing, and especially when you're talking Ray Alfala. That guy actually was a open the Drivers' World Championship for the open wheeled stuff. He was in the Pro Series there as well. A couple things from the chat that I want to address. Tim, I don't have the rev sound ready to go, so I'm going to give you a thank you very much. Psh, 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 give you the turbo snort for that. Thank you very much, Tim. We'll try to get that added to the show. In addition to that, there was a question. Oh, I missed it. I gotta scroll back. I'm sorry.
Are you talking about Night Stalker?
Night Stalker.
That was.
I put it in our. Chat.
Okay.
I think Billy just kind of touched on that, and the fact that, I guess the level of competition between a game like NASCAR Heat, or you could even draw a parallel and say F1, the franchise 2017, 18, whatever, and something like iRacing where the progression is so deep. The parallels there. Is it better to go towards a NASCAR Heat or an F1 type franchise, or
NASCAR Heat? You're going to have a bigger pool of people, but I don't think that the depth is there.
And it's truly reset. So despite the best of the best are going to get to the top no matter what, right now you don't have to work your way through a predefined field. Like, to get into the iRacing World Championships right now, you would have to, if you came into iRacing today, you'd have to license up to A. Mm-hmm. You would then have to make yourself in the top 50 of the oval guys to get into the Pro Series, and then you'd have to be in the upper half of that grid to get into the Championship Series. So, I mean, to me, I don't see how somebody could do all of that inside of at least 2 seasons. I mean, and that's obscene. That's 2 seasons. That's half a year in iRacing. Just to get to the point where you're eligible to win that championship. And at that point, if it's beyond February 12th, you've already missed the beginning of the season.
Right.
So with Heat, I think the opportunities are a little more wide open right now than with iRacing. But that's just time. If Heat maintains a championship grid, by next season, it might be harder to get into that top group.
Right. I was going to use, Brandon alluded to the F1 series, and I would say, the second season of the ESports F1 championship was much more difficult to get into, I believe,
yes,
than the first round. So once people figure it out, they will migrate there, and then it will become more difficult to get into.
Look at how many names were displaced in the second year of that by the known names of sim racing from a variety of sims, R Factor, iRacing, all these other hardcore sim guys all of a sudden became F1 2018 pros.
Yeah, it all kind of wraps into itself. It's a never-ending cycle. But again, I thought it's just it made me think about shorter schedule, but more money. What was the impetus for that? Why were we going in that direction? Not that it's a bad thing.
Well, I think
was
it makes
purely a time thing, or was it, hey, we're gonna go do some of these other races, and what are you guys gonna do?
I think it makes it more entertaining. I think when a season gets too long, and I think one of the reasons that football is so loved is because the season is relatively short. And it makes every game super important because one loss could be the reason you didn't get in the playoffs. And you look at even a basketball with like an 80-something game schedule, or a baseball with 140 whatever games they play. Mm-hmm. You could easily make the argument that a single baseball game during the season just almost doesn't matter. And I'd even dare to say that the players and managers at some point even throw in the towel on games like, oh, this one's a loss, who cares? Versus you can't ever do that in football. I think when they knock it down to a 14-race season, one DNF could be the difference versus a really long season. One DNF might be completely obtainable.
Yeah, you could rebound.
Overcomable. Jesse Fox asked a question a while back when we were talking all the NASCAR stuff, or Casey Kane, and asking about pro drivers and iRacing. A new driver to iRacing has to go through the ladder system no matter what their name is. So their account, Casey Kane, if he came to iRacing, he's got to rookie up. He's got to get his way up there. However...
That is not true.
Well, hold on. But for the pro race, they give them all the pro licenses. They don't just give the black badge pro license to any real-life driver, if I'm not mistaken.
Last year, and I think it's close to the same this year, except they've got more people in there. For dirt, you could be any license and get your pro license if you qualified through the qualifiers.
Because it was season 1.
Well, this year's the same way. Now, if there's a tie, they will take the higher license. If I read it right, God, I hope this is right. They will take the higher licensed driver, and it's a discretionary pick on their part. But theoretically, you could be a lower level licensed driver and still compete in the Pro Series.
Okay. But to
Playing
get
favorites.
into the Peak Antifreeze series, if
Peak Antifreeze is different.
Yeah,
all the other ones are different, but the dirt one in particular
Right.
is kind of stands on its own.
And I think the same thing happened with the rally car, and that kind of gets back to what we were saying about Heat 3. Season 1, or Season 1.5, if they kind of had a season, and now they're having it for real. Season 1, you know, they're going to do their drafting, so to speak, for their league, but they have no one already there. By Season 2, you already have people there. It's just how many are you going to replace or drop or whatever, and then fill in from the open group below. So yeah, I guess a little of both to answer your question, Jesse. If a IndyCar phenom joined iRacing tomorrow, they would not just get a pro license to run in the Porsche series. Oh, actually, I don't know that. The Porsche series might be a clean slate. We might be right back to the top of the top are the pro series. So you, as a rookie driver, probably could get in on that one right now. I don't know if Martin Kroenke and Mitchell de Jong and Gregor Hutu all get a oh, no, I did hear that. The top 20 or 30 from the World Championship Series are automatically in. Then the other spots go into that open group of whoever's highest ranked at that point. So, all right, there you go. All right, Billy, this one, I think you should bring this in on this next topic. Oh, I've lost Billy.
Uh-oh.
Discord is killing me. We were using Discord chat, and I have a completely frozen Billy, so I guess I will bring in the next topic. And that's really a shame, because Billy was going to do so much better a job than I'm about to do on this. And I will filibuster the topic just a moment in hopes that somehow, some way, Billy Strange makes it back to the stream. But, you know, there are certain companies, topics, things that just every once in a while they make you go, You gotta wonder, what are they thinking? What's going on? And one of the biggest companies in the news over the holiday season, hands down, was Slightly Mad Studios. You've got announcements left and right coming out of that place. These are the guys behind Project Cars, formerly part of an EA group responsible for Need for Speed Shift and
There we are.
Billy's back. Billy, I was doing a really long-winded introduction to our next topic, so I still haven't let the cat out of the bag.
Okay, yeah, no, the power shut off for like 5 seconds. Oh, you know what's funny is I have everything on a battery backup except my internet line is in another room, the main router, and that shut off. So nothing here went down, but I was like, uh-oh.
All right, so Billy, you want to tell him what the next topic is?
All right. I have so many questions. I really do. So Ian Bell took to Twitter, and that is the CEO of Slightly Mad Studios, and said Slightly Mad is developing a standalone console. So very quickly, Variety, this is the first place you can catch this. Variety got a hold of him, and he just gave a few tidbits. He's saying some weird stuff. He said some things that were obviously wrong. He talked about 60 frames per eye and just for VR, and just like, what? So to quote, around 3 years time for the launch of the console, and it will be a console as is the Xbox or PlayStation. It will support most major VR headsets in those upcoming, and the specs will be equivalent to a very fast PC 2 years from now. We're in early talks with manufacturers' components, so we can't say much more right now other than we have the designs spec'd out in detail. He said it's the most powerful it will be the most powerful console ever built. It's literally mad. He's calling it the Mad Box. Awful name. You want, and why is it not the slightly PlayStation instead? You want, but he says you want 4K, the Mad Station. You want 4K, you want VR at 60 FPS. That's where it gets weird. That's like not the right thing to say. You want a full engine for free to develop your games on, you have it. So what he's talking about is he's trying to future-proof the console, which is fine, but there's going to be no exclusives. He talks about not wanting to deal with exclusives, but then all you have is a PC. Like, right. Exclusives, in my opinion, make a console. So then all you're doing is making a PC. So you have the Variety article. Then IGN, which Todd Unwin found this for us just a little bit ago, which is great, so thank you. IGN has a deal where it says the biggest difference between the whoa, it changed on me. Hold on just a second. It flipped to a different it's right there. But anyway, he talks about now it's 3.5 years away, and they give these renders of these PCs, and if those aren't LEDs, that's water cooling. It's a PC. Water cooling takes maintenance?
It's not a console if it takes maintenance? I love the fact that it's going to be equivalent to a PC 2 years from now, but the project is 3.5 years away.
By any track record that they've had, that means it's going to be 5 or 6 years away. So my bigger point is there is a reason, while they may get leaked, there is a reason usually. The only exception has been Xbox One X. There's usually a reason why they don't announce new hardware until they're much closer to the release date, because specs and everything change and technology changes. And granted, these start much earlier than when they talk about them. There's a reason that they do that.
Sure.
Not to mention, can we talk about the state that Project Cars 1 and Project Cars 2 are in?
Are there going to be enough patches? Is that what you mean?
Right? I have so many questions, and my brain hurts thinking about this, because why would you announce something like this? The only way this works out well is if they literally, it's a concept, and then they've given it to somebody else, and somebody else takes care of it.
Sure. Well,
and he talks about an oligarchy, or almost a monopoly by the three major Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony. But isn't there a reason?
Well, and they don't have a monopoly, because you also have your players that come and go in that same group. It's just those are the ones who've been able to be successful. There's the furthest thing from the monopoly by the fact that just Forza versus PlayStation alone has kept the gaming market fueled. I mean, I'm all for as many competitions, so whether you call it monopoly or having more players, that's all good. But, when I think of this, I think of the phrase, jack of all trades, master of none. And it's like, I've yet to see Slightly Mad master their number one, which is software. And no offense, I mean, I love Project Cars 2. This is not me trying to take them down at all.
No, there are things that I like that Project Cars 2 does.
Yeah.
But if we want to be objective, like I think you were going to say, go ahead.
Yeah, but it's far from perfect. So why don't you guys work on perfecting your skills? You guys are making huge promises for Project Cars 3, using wording that I would never use. I mean, there's so many words you can choose to describe what you're going to do without even mentioning your competition. So anyway, to me, it's like, and then the other thing that comes to my mind is, hardware and software, despite working together, they are completely different skill sets. They're completely different worlds. They might as well say, hey, Slightly Mad is going to start making cardboard boxes, you know.
And
Like,
Nintendo did that.
well, they're just, I mean, it's like, so you're just randomly completely picking a completely different industry to get into, and I don't understand. I mean, honestly, if I were gonna, I don't necessarily know the name Slightly Mad helps them in that direction either. Like, I don't know if their name is so big in the world of hardware that it's gonna be like, oh wow, so they could have
Well,
made
and
any
that's the
company. They
thing
could have
is,
made a new company.
I just don't understand. They sold well or decent. It's not like you're a powerhouse, let's say, like, although Bethesda's got an awful reputation right at the moment, but like a Bethesda or even like an Activision, one of the major publishers, right? These guys are developers, and it's, what is it? Bandai Namco is what they go under
Right,
for the publishing.
right.
So they're not even a publisher; they're a developer, and they're going to jump. I don't understand. There are things that are not correct with these games. While I have fun with Project Cars 2 and Project Cars 1, Project Cars 1 got left on the chopping block as far as I'm concerned to go to Project Cars 2. There were several things that were broken in that one that never got addressed. And the same thing happens in Project Cars 2. There's a lot of things I like in it, and there's a lot of things that just don't work right at all. And goes back to the topic we were talking about last week. How long does a developer support
Right.
a title? And so are you telling me now that the reason you stopped working on Project Cars 2 was to do Project Cars 3, and now you're going off into Never Never Land with this console? I don't understand.
Yeah.
And this only affects the people that are really into this, and I understand that. Like, the general gaming sphere does not have any clue what's going on here. But on the inside, I look at it and go, those games weren't finished. So how is your console, which is really just going to be a PC, how's that going to work?
I agree. And there's a side of me that, like, how dare you, right? Like you pulled the plug on 1, you're pulling the plug on 2, you're moving on to 3, and some of us who love Project Cars 2 are kind of like, yeah, but what about this? And now, instead of even just 100% focusing on number 3, so now I have to assume that you're giving it the effort that 1 and 2 got, and now you're going to divide your staff and your effort and all your attention. Who do you think you are, Elon Musk? No.
And I don't know Emil. I'm sure he's a nice guy. Like, and so he's maybe more like a Peter Molyneux, where the idea just escapes from them, and then all of a sudden they get down the road and they realize they can't do all those things. So maybe that's, he's got a lot. I mean, I've got a lot of ideas too, but he has the money to maybe kind of at least start the process, and maybe that's just what this is. But on the other end, you just have to look at the track record, and I'm just like, and then those renders, man. Like, why?
Why does it take up so much room?
Well, I just don't. I mean, it's cute that you've got the little M on there for your Mad Box. But it looks, yes. It it'll stand. I don't know what else. Anyway, it's just one of those things that I saw it, and I messaged you guys. I was like, WTF ... I was.
So let me ask you guys. Let me ask you guys this: how much does this idea? How much do you think the market shares play into this? Where we've seen that PC gaming and PC sales financially seem to be quite a bit less than the console market, and that the real money in gaming is the console side of things.
Sure. I mean, in total sense. And we've seen a few variations of what they're doing. This isn't the first. I've seen 3 or 4 attempts at the PC console, trying to make it so that, no offense, that a John Hill type, somebody who just like, I don't want to deal with any of the tech, but I want the
Steam
power
boxes?
of PC.
Yep, Steam.
Yeah, the Steam box.
And those didn't go anywhere.
No, and that's the thing. None of them have ever done anything.
The Ouya, the Ouya was
Yep.
supposed to be, taking, what was it, the Android or whatever, and making it so that it was going to run the, games that didn't need as much horsepower. That fell on its face.
Right.
I mean, so you're gonna build this big old beefy console to compete with Xbox and PlayStation. Great. I mean, that sounds good. But to your point, the market share, where do you fit in, especially if you're not going to have any exclusives? What's going to take somebody from Xbox or PlayStation, right? What's going to make them go over to
Madbox?
Grab a Madbox. I mean, Nintendo lives off of its IPs,
Right.
that go way back. The reason people buy the lower powered hardware of a Nintendo console is because they make a really polished game, number one, and they make sure that those are their IPs and they don't go anywhere else. So if you want a Mario experience, you want a Zelda experience, any of those, Animal Crossing, you go to a Nintendo handheld or console. So if you don't have an exclusive, what do you have?
Sure.
You have a PC.
Yep. And that's the other thing is, it's the PC's had kind of a challenged life in that it's the type of thing that you really do need to have pretty deep knowledge to be a PC user. You can go into a company where you have software that's super polished, you turn it on and it goes right into the mode that the business has it built for. But, I think of somebody like my mom who's just always struggled with even knowing what computers do or how to work them or how to even move a file around or anything. And it looks like we lost Billy again. Oh, he's back. But that's the thing. The PC world has always been where people want that freedom. They want to be able to upgrade. They want to be able to keep it. And when you buy a console, there's peace of mind in the fact that you're buying a bulletproof system. There's no reason anything should fail. It's tried and true already. It's already a little bit dated technology-wise for that same reason. This is sort of the concept that NASA runs by. NASA uses older computers because they're tried and true.
Sure.
And they don't want the cutting edge because the cutting edge hasn't been proven yet. And, and then the other peace of mind that comes with the console is that you buy your games and provided the developer built it properly, it should work as well. And back in the days of Atari and Nintendo, that was a given. Now the games aren't as polished as they used to be, in my opinion. But for the most part, the whole principle still stands. But on the PC side of things, it's still that world where you get something and you run into compatibility issues often. You run into update issues often, and things like that. And that's what makes it a PC. I hate to say it, but we get the high end, we get the cutting edge, we get the super graphics, we get the amazing frame rates, we get all the things that go with it. But we're also constantly finicky and fiddling and trying to get the most out of it, and it just doesn't fit in the word console in my mind. I mean, it's like an opposite concept. It's like getting back to a utopian type thought. It's like, yeah, it'd be great if you could do it that way, but that's just not the way PCs work.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, I've been reading the chat while we've been going, so everybody's got some good points in here. I don't know, somebody was saying, Pelican, SMS knows something we don't, and it's very possible. But again, I just go back to past track record and where do you fit in?
And I think you touched upon it earlier, but I mean, obviously, Forza, the Xbox version wouldn't work on that. You'd need the PC version, I'm assuming. GT Sport isn't going to work because these are licensed to the PlayStation. They don't let GT Sport work on the Xbox for a very good reason.
God of War, the new Spider-Man, all those are. That's the whole point, right? The point of a console is simplicity, which you could make an argument they're not as simple as they used to be, but they still have exclusives, regardless of how you feel about how similar the Xbox and the PlayStation are. The fact of the matter is, they still have exclusives to each of those.
Sure.
And there are consoles that I do play games on that you can play on both, and I will prefer my Xbox One X over my PS4 Pro.
Well, and that's the thing, and this is where Slightly Mad is just sort of a little out of it. In the world of sim racing or motorsport gaming, those who are on the console, if you're a Forza fan, you obviously are an Xbox owner. If you're a Gran Turismo fan, you're obviously a PlayStation owner. And if you love them both, then you own both consoles. That's the way it works. So, does that mean the Slightly Mad Box is only going to play Project Cars and that's its only game? I mean, I don't. I guess Bandai Namco could help them out, but Bandai is one of those companies that depends on making games for both consoles and PC, not playing that restriction game that Microsoft and Sony play.
Yeah, it will be interesting. Yeah, like you said, jack of all trades, master of none is what comes to mind, and I'm afraid of what's going to happen. You know, if this runs, I mean, Todd mentioned that they've got investors, and they've been talking to people, obviously. And Ian sounds like he can sell something pretty well. So maybe this is a thing. Maybe it does come out. I don't know when it comes out. I don't know how well it's going to compete. I don't know. Anyway, we can kill the topic. I just like I said, I have so many questions.
In this modern era, you really can get people to invest in just about anything, especially if you're a really gifted salesperson. Because you could draw these pictures, you could give the concept of how you're going to work your way into that whole Microsoft Sony split of things, get your way, and maybe you won't have your Halo or your Forza, but you'll get the Bandai Namco, you'll get the independent developers who do for both platforms. You just won't get those exclusives to the two big titles. But in 3 years, in 5 years, in 10 years, we're going to be one of them too. We'll have our own in-house brands. We already got Slightly Mad. We already got access to the Bandai Namco companies.
Right.
And I could see that in concept, I could raise money on that idea. I mean, it sounds cool. Give me some pictures, give me some cool marketing jargon, and if I'm a big player and I have a lot of money, I might be down for that. But do I really think it's viable? Look at how hard Nintendo's had trying to break back in. Because they were out. Nintendo was kind of nowhere. And
after the Wii, the Wii U flopped because it was a terrible naming structure. People didn't understand. But then they come out with the Switch.
Yep.
And they managed to get everybody all pumped up again.
And
same thing that kind of happened with the GameCube and stuff like that. So
and I think I heard Coleco
it's not impossible.
Was getting back. One of the olds. I think it was Coleco.
Yeah, there have been others that have been trying to take a stab. Atari had some sort of box they were playing around with or something, and it's just like, so this is not the first one in the last handful of years we've seen.
But see, both of those companies have something that Slightly Mad doesn't. They can come out with a new one and go back to the legacy products as just a backbone right off the bat. It's like, I'm Atari, right. I'm going to give you a new one, and with it, you get the 2600 game pack. And it's like, yes, it would suck, because who really wants to play 2600 games anymore? But yes, you can play Pitfall. Yes, you can play Indiana Jones, And that's the thing that the big houses getting back into it have. Slightly Mad, again, if this worked, if it was a true proprietary console of any kind, not just a dressed up PC box, they're gonna have just zero, and it's gonna be so hard to get traction, and then they're gonna start collecting dust.
Well, and like several have stated in our chat, the amount you make on a console is so small. I mean, this is the first, if I remember correctly, this is the first time PlayStation on hardware has made any money.
Right. They were the lost leader to sell software.
Yes. So as of right now, I believe these new generation of consoles are like the first time they've actually made money on the console. And it was only like a few dollars a console or something like that. So like, well, where is the money without the exclusives?
Yeah, and I think the consensus is why, but if they're relying on Project Cars 3 being an exclusive to their console, I don't think that's a strong enough product to support the sales of that.
And it would kill the sales of the title.
Yep.
which
Yeah.
they're dependent on as a company, and I think they did very well financially off of Project Cars 2.
Yeah.
I'm assuming.
So anyway,
All right.
Well,
I think
I
I've,
did
I think
have-
I've beat that dead horse.
I did have a quick tech question for chat, and I think I answered in there, but I just wanted to get your input on it. Jay Will wanted to know, he just got a V2.5, and he's struggling with force feedback on iRacing. I know Billy and I just talked about this recently, but I told him to do the strength anywhere from 5 to 15, set the Newton meter slider, which is kind of a new concept to iRacing most recently, but set it to the force of the wheel, which I think those are like 7.1 or 7.4 for the V2.5, and then set the dampening and minimum force down to 0. Is that correct, Billy?
Yeah, I have one.
That's what I
Oh,
like,
go ahead.
yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead, Billy.
And
No, I was just gonna say that's what I like. I mean, I don't run my force feedback really strong, but when we started talking about it the other day, I actually played with the dampening a little more, and I found that I like turning the damper way down, because it gives me a more sense of when the front end does dig in, because the dampening brings up a constant force. So when the sim tells it, you know, the forces shouldn't be so much, there's like a shelf, and it tries to bring those bottom end forces up so you don't get a huge difference, a huge swing in just wheel weight. And I found that I liked it actually where I did get a larger swing in the wheel weight. So yeah, I mean, that sounds close to what should be correct.
Okay.
Or not correct, but like a good starting point. How about that?
Okay, what'd you have, Sean?
What I was going to say is the first thing I do with the Fanatic, if I'm in that boat of having force feedback, was drift mode. Drift mode, I find, completely will change the behavior of that wheel in the exact same conditions, exact same sim. And if the drift mode is off, it just won't feel right. There's just too much or too little momentum in the wheel once I start turning it. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm going by memory. If I'm not mistaken, I run either -1 or -2 on the drift mode, if I memory serves correctly. But it doesn't matter what I run, because again, it's what you think it should be, and
you'll play with it. It's a force feedback is what you were saying. Force feedback is such a personal thing. Like maybe my strength isn't good enough or enough for you, so you're going to turn the strength up higher. That English is hard, and or maybe you don't like the feeling of the wheel kind of feeling light at the bottom end when you're not carrying a bunch of speed or not cornering really hard. It feels a little more quote unquote realistic to me, but I think it's a good starting point, and then you can adjust from there.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
Okay, and then I actually had a couple other questions from the community. The MXer99, we know him as Brandon. He was wondering, on the last week we were talking about Dirt and Dirt Series, the Dirt franchise, that he can't understand Codemaster's stance on VR and why they are not supporting it as of yet in Dirt Rally 2. He wants to know what your guys' thoughts on that are, and the fact that most mainstream sims right now do offer VR support, and some of the upcoming ones like ACC. So what do you guys think?
Go ahead, Sean.
Most things when we're having questions about sim racing stuff, it really does just the same principles of life: supply and demand. And sometimes in the world of sim racing, on top of supply and demand, you have like kind of a bang for buck. So I think it's one of those things where the demand is low, and the amount of work it takes for them to do that and stay with it, because it's not just implementing it, but it's staying with it. So if they had just come out when Oculus did it, that was one thing. But what about when the Vive came out? What about when the Vive Pro came out? What about when Windows Mixed Reality came into play? What are the variations between all these systems, and how many of them are they then going to have to support? I don't know. I don't know enough about VR, but I know it's like one of those, once you say yes to the concept, you have to support it across the board, and you have to stay current with it. The other thing is, when we're talking about numbered titles, I like that kind of works. Dirt 3, Dirt 4, whatever you want to call it. Project Cars 2, 3. We also know that they have limited shelf life. Like, this is the game. This is what we're going to do for it. And then, they're going to kind of cut things off at certain points and say
Right.
this
It's
is
not.
all we're going
It's
to
not a
implement.
service.
Yeah. Now, in a new game, you'd certainly expect VR support, but then how much are they? We all joke around, no VR, no buy. Are they getting that comment? Are they getting those emails? Are they getting those questions asked of them? But if nobody's asking, then they're not going to put it on their radar either. It's like, okay, well, if they're getting 100 emails a day saying you have to put VR in this, it's going to make an impression and go beyond supply and demand. So, yeah, those are kind of my thoughts there.
Yeah, I think what happened was developers thought VR would blow up more than it did. And so I think there was this rush and this impetus to put VR in all the titles. And I think what happened really quick was that they did not see a huge return on them implementing VR, number one. And you're asking them to do more work for the same amount of money. So a 60, let's take Project Cars, right? Project Cars 2 still cost, what was it, 50, $60? Yet they put VR in there.
Right.
And I think, did Project Cars 1 have VR? I think it did, didn't it?
I have a little emergency. I'll be right back.
So they put those, in other words, they didn't get any extra money for the VR.
Mm-hmm.
So as they went along, I think they realized that the return on the investment that they made may not be as lucrative as they thought it would be. And this is kind of why, one of the reasons why I never went and still haven't gone VR, because I am afraid that VR is not going to stick around in the gaming sphere until like a smaller manufacturer, like a Fanatic or a Thrustmaster is to wheels. You're going to find that the only way I think this is viable for sim titles and maybe flight sims and stuff like that is to have a specific manufacturer only market to the sim genre versus this big global appeal for all these things, and you're making all these small VR experiences. I think that's where it gets hamstrung. So I don't want to see VR go away. I'd actually like to see it be implemented more, but I think the reality is the money isn't there. So they have to make a decision. Can we easily implement VR? If we can, then VR goes in. If it's going to cost us big bucks, the VR, no buy is probably such a small percentage of actual sales. They probably sit there and go, that is not our main concern. And you have to believe that when Codemasters looked at the data for Dirt Rally and said, we implemented it, we really didn't net any more sales because of it. This is how long it took us to put it in. This is how many man hours it took us to put it in.
This is what it cost.
Yeah. So is it worth the risk of trying to put it into Dirt 4? The very few sales we're going to lose still doesn't justify the cost that we're putting into it. And that has to be the reason why they're not putting it in. Now, like an iRacing or something like that, it's already in. It's already in there.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
well, and you guys both know I'm a VR guy. Pretty much exclusively. That's how I built my setup, was around VR, just because I believe in the experience so much. But my scope of what I use it for is very limited, and I think that's what lends itself best for that application. I agree with you, Billy. I think them having to split their resources and as far as where the money's at in VR right now, and I think it's all going to hardware. It's little development teams that are doing the software that, unless it falls naturally into place, like in the case of iRacing, it fails.
Right.
And unless that money's there from a major development studio to support a VR title properly, that's where it falls down, as the implementation. Because iRacing's an excellent experience in VR. Other titles, there's a lot more tweaking, and there's been some talk about it in chat of Dirt Rally 1. I've recently picked that up just to support the VR side of things, and I've still yet to be able to get it to run properly on my system because it's clunky.
Right. Well, and Dave makes a point that in chat the market's different now. More people with VR compared to when Rally 1 came out, and you're correct, but it's still such just a small percentage. And you're taking it in an overall aspect, and we have to look at it in a sim racing. It's even smaller.
Yep.
Well,
In just our little genre, it's going to be even a smaller portion. Has it grown? Sure, it has, but I don't believe it's grown at the rate that when everybody started implementing VR. I don't think it's grown at the rate they thought it was going to grow.
no, it
So
definitely hasn't. And here's the other thing. Sometimes, especially if you're a software developer, we were talking about Slightly Mad making the box. You know, they're not hardware developers, they're software developers. And when new hardware tech comes out, they don't know what's going to be a fad versus is going to really stick. And if it really does stick, at what generation of the new tech do you get in on it? So I'll use 3D as an example. When 3D came out, it seemed really cool. I loved it. When 3D first came out, I was like, wow, they're going to change the world. And then no one on planet Earth bought it. And it fizzled out and went away. And if developers had gone out of their way to accommodate 3D to then 18 months later have it be almost an obsolete tech, that would be a tremendous waste of resources. On the flip side, going back to VR, which I think it's pretty safe to say that VR is going to stay, but will something like the Oculus and the Vive look like clunker old, Model T type, no offense to the Model T, but are they going to look like these, like, an infant built it on specs that nobody would clown and joke about, and then at what point on the tech do you get in? I don't know the exact terminology of like the sensors used, for the tracking and things like, but are there going to be changes in that kind of stuff? And will that change the software side of things as well? And it's like, wouldn't it suck if you're a company just trying to make a good game to have to hire a whole department to deal with one tech that's going to be changing? It's going to go through generations. That's my I think when we see like the Pimax level, and I saw another company that's going to be at CES, when we see these level headsets come in, when the graphics cards can push them, well, we're at we're already tripling the resolution of what they're doing today. So if I'm a company supporting VR today, I'm supporting it at that resolution. I got to keep, I don't know, it just seems it's so new right now. It's like hard to stay with, I think.
Well, and if you've purchased VR, Mike from Sim Racing 604 was saying it's not like you don't have great titles that support it right now. So you still, and like iRacing is a good example because it's a service, right? So let's say VR stops being implemented in titles. You still have titles that you can use VR in, and those are great experiences. So it's not like VR isn't worth it. What you miss out on is the new stuff.
Sure.
So you have to make that concession. And I think that would have been, in my opinion, a realistic forecast to understand that VR may not get, as much as you love VR, it may not get supported later on down the line if it doesn't take traction. And what you missed was I was saying it might take somebody, for instance, like a Fanatic or a Thrustmaster, instead of having this big global reach specific to sims like flight sims and racing sims. So like a Thrustmaster or a Fanatic, to build a headset, a VR unit just for those.
Right.
And then it might be more viable rather than this, global appeal to everything. So it's just something to think about. I don't want VR to go away. I think it's a neat experience, and I know a lot of people love it. They feel faster when they do it. I think it's easier to comprehend for a lot of people. So I definitely don't want to see it go away. But the problem is logistically and financially, the budget now just ballooned even more. Yep. And you just put through another wrench into the mix that can mess things up. So you have to be realistic about why. There's got to be a reason, right? There's got to be a reason why Codemaster sat there and go, this just isn't a good idea. At least at the moment, this isn't a good idea.
Here's the other thing. You are indirectly supporting another ring outward in the hardware world. So when I make a game, I have to make it work on a console or I have to make it work on a PC. If I have to make it work on a PC, I'm dealing with AMD, I'm dealing with NVIDIA drivers on the graphics side of things. We've got some, Realtek drivers on the audio side of things. But these things have been in place for decades at this point. And, the structure to do it has been there, and everybody kind of does the same thing because that's how you make a game with a PC. When you get into something that now plugs into the PC, I now am supporting a fourth party product, because now not only am I supporting...
Yeah, what happens if NVIDIA stops supporting something like that, or Intel?
Yeah, or that the end user is having a problem on their computer, has nothing to do with graphics card, has nothing to do with the sim, but all of a sudden I'm on the phone with you teching your Oculus, and and it's so removed that it's a little different. I mean, I know sim companies have to do that with Fanatec, Thrustmaster, Logitech on the wheel end, right? We plug those in. But this is the essential part that we've been using for decades also at this point. VR is a new part. It's just so different, and we've even seen, think back, when a butt kicker came out, it was just a butt kicker. And this shows you how long ago and how stupid I was. But I talked to Mark Luden, the owner of Butt Kicker. I'd be like, when are you it's going to make a program that runs on the DLL, which was like the program name extension for R Factor 1. And and this shows how much I didn't know about coding. I was using the wrong wording explaining it to him because it wasn't a DLL, in fact. But it was like, why is the game not running my butt kicker? Why is this thing an audio device? And I'm talking to the guy who makes an audio product. They really got their start, making stuff for drummers, right? Isn't that where the beginning of butt kicker was? So that musicians could get feedback that they couldn't, hear?
Oh, you know what? I don't know.
I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right, yeah.
So, and it's like, but then years later, you have things like SimVibe, and there's some competitor software to SimVibe that'll do the same thing. And it's like, now we are driving those butt kickers. It just took time until it was like, okay, this is a tech that's here to stay in our industry. Now it's going to get more support, and I think VR is the same thing. That when it's a little more go-to for every sim racer, you'll start seeing it be the no VR, no make. When it's the go-to for every sim racer, and 3 years ago, no software company would have added a Newton meter bar to their sim, but iRacing did, and it was because of the popularity of the OSW and the direct drive wheels that are out there, the powerful wheels that needed a Newton meter adjustment or people are going to hurt themselves kind of thing. And it was the popularity that made them start to support it at that level. And I think the same thing we'll see with VR. When the popularity is there, you'll see it just become more standardized and more go-to, and that no game would ever come out without VR support.
I think what people fail to remember is that VR, in the level we have it now, is still relatively new. Yeah. It's still relatively in its infancy. Yes. And I think I credit Oculus and what Lucky Palmer and those guys did with the initial DV1 and DV2 kits, or DK1 and DK2 kits, is they've really kind of turned everything on its ear, because VR headsets have been done before. Sony had done them. The tracking wasn't there, but the level they brought it to made the experience serviceable enough that it's now a thing.
Yep.
At least right now. And I think it's kind of left every other aspect of the support for it, be it the hardware side from the PCs, the software side, even just some of the interaction stuff. I know Pelican was talking about they need to fix it some way to where people that have motion sickness problems, where you have your inner ear issues, there's so many aspects that they still need to address. I know Shaun and we were talking about haptic feedback gloves for sim racing, and it's like there's so many things that still need to be worked on that I still don't even think VR is mainstream yet.
No,
it's got a long ways to come.
I honestly, growing up, I was born in the 60s, grew up in the 80s, so to speak. I this is the stuff that I thought we were going to have 10, 15 years ago, to be honest with you. So even though it's taken this long, but we saw variations of it, like you said, decades and decades ago. But I think that we're going to see a real acceleration because I think, anybody's watched the movie Ready Player One. It's like my favorite movie now. I don't know why. But you see where it's all going. And having haptic devices, we already have them. A butt kicker is essentially doing that on that level. Having gloves that interact with our VR, we're seeing those on the market already. If you had the money, you could design a haptic suit that could create so many different scenarios. I mean, it's endless what you could throw into such a thing. And I think that stuff, and that's the thing that's different about VR, is VR is one of those products that's forcing us to not just take VR on its own, but start to see how much it opens the door of what tomorrow's gaming, computing, virtual reality is going to be like. Because it's going to go beyond just visual. We saw that thing just in the news the other day, the smell-o-vision. Man, if I could smell burning rubber when I was sim racing in VR, I wouldn't know that I wasn't doing it for real. It's like the only thing missing at that point is some way of giving me pain. Because racing at times actually does hurt the body. There are certain bumps, certain corners, certain loads that actually make you tense up. And, that's one thing my sim still is yet to do. We get to that next level, smell-o-vision, we get to haptic. I mean, I don't know how many people are sick enough for this, but I would sign up for the pain part. Like, okay, give me a suit, and it can pinch me, it can shock me, it can burn me. I'm not, whatever. But if that crash needs to give me some kind of physical pain, I'll take it. And again... no other product in computing, I think, has made us think these until you put a VR headset in. And for the first time ever in gaming, whether you're sim racing, flying, shooter games, you're like, holy shit, I'm here. I'm literally here. I am in the friggin' car. The fire extinguisher bottle is right there, and I could pull the pin if I wanted to. And I've just never had that in gaming. And, I know it's sort of an off-topic thought, but again... I don't think any other products challenge the industry like VR has.
If you want to try that pain thing, just turn up that GS5 you got there and see what she can do. Billy, do you have any final thoughts on this?
No, I would just say it's purely a financial and logistics reason that they didn't put it in.
Okay.
Yep.
And then one other thing. Yeah, I've got one last thing. And Theodore, he is in our chat right now, so he might be able to help me clarify this, but he did bring something to us via the Discord. And it's basically how much money should somebody spend if they're interested in pursuing esport? And I'm assuming that he's looking at it as in if you're trying to chase it as a life goal, versus playing a traditional stick and ball sport like soccer or football. But, what would you spend on the equipment? And, how much money would you spend on converting that into time? And what path would you take? Would you go, let's say Mario Kart, a viable analog for training a kid into sim racing or an esport versus going, okay, little Johnny, here's your iRacing subscription, go get them.
This reminds me of when I asked Billy if he'd let his kids pursue esport as a profession.
Yes, very good.
The esport thing, it's just as much money as you're willing to spend on it. There really is no barrier for entry. I go back to what we answered for Jesse last week is you can take a T150 and a set of, or a G25 and a set of those pedals, whatever, and you can be just as fast as anybody. Are you going to get the immersion? Are you going to get the experience? No, but the main thing is making sure that you understand your equipment and you're familiar with your equipment and you're getting the most out of your equipment. That is purely dependent on how much money you're willing to spend. I don't think there's like some minimum price point as far as I mean, you're going to have to spend some money to get in there, but I'm just saying I don't think you need to spend $1,000.
Right.
No, see, I'd actually put a cap on it, on what I'd spend, because the money isn't the part. The money isn't the investment. You know, it's like in fact, I wouldn't recommend anyone bought anything better than a T300 or a Fanatic wheel, because when you get into the ESport competitions, chances are that's the type of equipment that you're going to be using. So there's no sense in learning how to drive great on a big giant direct drive motor.
Yeah.
Maybe a podium, but I don't think I'd make that leap until I see it on every series there is. And then the same, more importantly, I don't want any super fancy pedals, unfortunately, because that's not what you're going to be given at the event should you make that, level. I'd say it's like kind of like soccer. Like, okay, well, in soccer, it's a pretty low investment sport. You know, you need a field, which there's got to be one somewhere around you. You need something that resembles a ball, and you need a couple wadded up piles of clothing to represent a goalpost. I mean, on its basic level, that is soccer. You know, how did Pele learn to play? You know, I hear cantaloupes and things like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like,
you got to put the time in.
you got to put the time in.
That's where
the
investment should go.
And you don't need
where,
a lot for that. Yeah,
no.
and so that,
I mean, there's going to be a minimum price point that you're going to have to spend on equipment. And if we're including the PC and a monitor or a TV, however you want to do it, you can adapt, though. I guess is what I'm getting at. You can adapt to all of those things and still really be fast.
Yeah.
The better point to his second question, rather, is putting the time in to understand the sim you're driving and the equipment that you're using. So if you have a guy that's spent, boatload of money, I'm talking super high-end stuff, and he doesn't understand the principles of braking and how to adjust his control panel and within the sim that he's using all of the variables for your wheel and pedal inputs. If he doesn't understand all that versus a guy that has a G27, if that guy understands exactly how the sim works and how his stuff works, and he's got it all dialed in, so he gets he's super consistent and he gets it the same way every time going into the corners, that equipment that guy has on the upper end isn't going to do him any good because he hasn't figured out the basics and the fundamentals yet.
Yep, absolutely true. And that led to what I was thinking is the money that I would spend, because again, I don't want triple screens either. I haven't seen triple screens in any of these competitions, so you don't need to learn on triples either. It's going to save you even more money because now you need less video card and less computer. But the other thing the area that I think I would spend money in this, so people, I talk to parents, people who learn what I do for, the show, and they're like, oh, wow, my kid's really into computers. They're really into gaming, and they talk about ESport all the time. And I'm looking at somebody my age who has no clue what their kids are talking about. And I'm trying to explain to these parents that this is a realistic goal. This is a realistic career. And more so in general ESport than sim racing ESport today, but that's going to change. But that it has the same kind of odds of being a professional sport player, in a band that is successful, being an actor. Anyone can get a job in local theater, but you can't call it a career. You call it a career when you're making enough money that's all you're doing, So if you're just, an actor until you're making enough money, and then of course the thing about all these industries, whether it be racing, pro sports, acting, music, all of these things, it's like you can struggle forever. And it's like there's not really a difference between struggling and next thing you know, you're Tom Cruise. And it's like it's one of those things. So it's like there's so few spots available, but the ones who get it get so grossly overpaid that, and there's enough of them out there making a living. So anyway, what I was going to get at is where I would spend money in this is coaching. I think that if you really want to be competitive on a pro sport, ESport level of any, there's a couple things. In the world of sim racing, you're going to probably do really well hiring yourself a Mitchie Hoyer to coach you or a VRS, getting coaching, driver instruction to make sure you're getting every tool that you can, because it is grounded in real life motorsport enough that you need to know what you're doing in a car. And the other thing is, I think, and I'm reading more and more articles about the mental part that's going on in ESport, because these 20-year-olds are fizzling out, and despite having $1 million opportunities, they're quitting and going away from the ESport scene. And it's the pressures of being a 20-year-old and being competitive on a Michael Jordan level and not having the mental capacity to deal with it. So even though you are good enough and that you could be making that kind of money, you're not going to. And I think that comes back to mental training and not necessarily like driver coaching as much as like when I worked with Fabio Martins, and it was like, how do I keep myself calm? How do I keep myself focused? How do I keep myself always peaking and excelling? And you know, you think and hear about sports psychology, and it's a very important part, and one of the things that maybe sometimes it's God-given, like the talent to these athletes, but sometimes it's a learned skill as well. So I think, again, if I were going to spend any money in investment, it wouldn't be hardware. It wouldn't be computers. It would be, you know, give me the basics and then teach me how to do the thing as best as anybody can.
And JF brings up a point. Go ahead.
Sorry, Billy. Shaun, can you check your audio level? A couple of people have mentioned you're a little low.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead, Billy.
JF also mentions that, you know, he's spending money on the equipment for the, and hi JF, for the experience, not to win races. And that's the difference. The higher end equipment usually means just a more immersive experience in while you're driving. You know, there's a difference between competing and just trying to race with your buddies or in a league, or even just, you know, maybe you are competitive in iRacing, but you want that extra feel. You want that little better wheel. That's because you want to, not because you have to.
Yep.
You know, I prefer, like, the brake is the biggest thing for me. So I prefer a specific way for the brake to feel. And whether I spend a lot of money or a little money is irrelevant to me. I want the brake to feel a specific way. Do I have to have it that way? No. I can figure out how to get my T3PA pedals dialed in with the brake. Just takes a little practice. So it's you know, if you're spending money on higher end equipment, it doesn't equate to a faster lap time. It can equate to more immersion, though.
Yep. Completely agree. All right, Brandon, anything else?
You know, I think that's all I've got from the community for this week.
Awesome. Well, another good show, fun show, good way to kick off 2019.
Yes.
What else do we have? Well, before we bring this to the close, we talked a little bit about Daytona and the Corvette Daytona prototype. Me and the patron guys will be practicing Saturday and Sunday. Time change. I think I screwed everything up. I think it was always supposed to be noon, and I made it 2 for some weird reason. But that noon actually works better for our Euro drivers. So I'll send an email out to everybody, but Saturday and Sunday we'll be doing some practice. We'll be streaming those probably so you can see and hear how we as a team are working together, and that should be pretty fun. Beyond that, over the weekend I should have my review of the Thrustmaster TSS handbrake Sparko mod. I should have that coming out between now and the end of the weekend for sure. Awesome. Anything going on in your world, Billy, for the weekend?
In about 45-ish minutes at 11:30 Pacific, I've got a premiere going on just for the V Rally 3. If anybody wants to hang out, I'll be in chat. It's about 30 minutes long, and just kind of taking a look at V Rally 3 on the PlayStation 2. So
where can they find that, Billy?
A premiere is not me playing it live. It's a recorded video, but I'm there in chat live. So it's like having the chat and we all interact with each other. I actually really like it because I can answer questions and pay attention to people more. So
you get to kick back with a bowl of popcorn, watch the video with them, and then talk to them about it in various ways.
Exactly.
I like it.
So that'll be over on my channel. And yeah, really that's it besides practicing with you guys.
And that's Billy Strange Racing on YouTube. You'll find that. And what time is that happening? That's coming up right now?
Yeah, at 11:30, in about 45-ish minutes.
Okay.
Awesome.
Cool. Look at that. We almost went 2 hours. Hour and 45 minutes. So I guess
so
you guys,
much fun.
The rule for 2019 is going to be dig in on Fridays. It's going to be long. We got a lot to talk about. Thank you, Billy Strange, for being here with me. Thank you, Brandon Waters, for being here.
Thank you, guys.
And thank you all for being part of the pit crew and making it so much fun to talk about sim racing each and every day. This is the Simpit. I'm Shaun Cole, and I'll see you on the track.
See ya.
Bye.